right? So because we have that little bit of thickness to our ray now, which makes things a lot easier to grab. It feels a lot more fluent. It's just better. So do it that way. It's better. Do you like grabbing and throwing things? Hell, of course you like grabbing and throwing things. Let's grab and throw some shit. So very simply, I'm going to run a terrain, sure, and we're going to build a very simple character controller. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make my character. I'm just going to use an empty. You can use a capsule. You can use whatever the hell you want, really. But whatever you do, make sure you put it on the train, because if you don't, you're stupid. There we go. So in our player, I'm not going to drag the camera in there because I'm going to use Send Machine because it's better. So I'm going to take a virtual camera, and I totally did not mean to do that. Get rid of all that. Alright, now create a virtual camera. And I take the virtual camera and I'm going to parent it to my player. Zero all this crap off. And go up on the Y so it's not, there. Now if you want, you can add whatever, capsule collider to this if you really want to. Something like that. There's our player. Beautiful. I'm going to add a empty Grabby McGrab, and he's a child to our virtual camera, and I'm going to stick him out, I don't know, 2 on the Z. Might be too far. So just to start off with, actually, you know what? I'm going to put a character controller. Let's get rid of the capsule. We don't need the capsule. We have a character controller because the way we roll. All right, cool. So we need movement. So very simply, we are going to get axis vector, and we are going to simple move. And I'll show you something because I think it's relative. Is the relative to. So for example, let's actually I can use the scene camera for this. Okay, so if I take my player and I create, this is just for demonstrational purposes. I'll use a 3D object, whatever. Okay, and I'm just going to squash this thing down, right? And I'm going to put him down a little lower. Take off his collider, he doesn't need it. And I'm going to create another one under the camera. I'm going to do that same thing like that. Now you're probably asking me why. What the hell is the purpose of this? And this is just so that you understand the player, when we move, the relative to in a first person is very important, and we want to be relative to this camera. And that's because when I say relative to this and we move in a self space, I didn't add the mouse look. Need to add the mouse look, so I'll do that. But when you're dealing with directions, you can't use the player, because the player's direction technically doesn't change. Why is this taking forever all of a sudden? Alright, there it goes. I don't know why it's doing that all of a sudden. But, you know, we don't even want to go in play mode. So I'm going to add a quick mouse look. Oh. It needs to be in a FSM. Mouse look 2 is actually better. It's on the ecosystem, but so I want to mouse look our virtual camera. And I like to drop the sensitivity down. I do negative on the Y, and I usually just turn these off. And sometimes those will show errors if you turn them off, but I don't care. They can show errors all they want. It doesn't hurt me. So we're not in full screen yet. No. Okay, good. So if you look at the bottom, keep in mind those two boxes and the directions they're facing. Right? So in a first person, as you see, my camera looks around. The other box doesn't move. The actual player technically doesn't ever turn. And I can push forward and I move this direction. Everything seems normal. You see how in the bottom there, that box, the bottom box, it's not turning. This is very important. So we have look and we have movement. And we have Grabby McGrab here. So we need stuff to grab. Well, let's create more 3D boxes. Stick the stuff over here. I'm just going to add a rigid body. Because we're going to be throwing it, I'm going to want it continuous dynamic so it doesn't go through the terrain and something stupid. Let's just make a couple of these. And just throw them around all over, whatever. They can all sit there. Alright, so we have our cubes that we can pick up and throw. How do we pick up and throw? Well, let's make a FSM. We'll call it grab. And we only really need a couple states. A mouse button down. If we get the mouse button down, try to grab. Right, so we're sitting here, we click, we're going to try to grab. So we want to raycast. Now, personally, I like sphere cast. And it's because really, you won't notice the difference when you're dealing with boxes like this, but when you're playing a game, if you have a smaller object, like if you think about it, if I create we'll do a cylinder, turn it on its side. So a sphere cast is identical to a ray cast, except it has thickness. So if you think of an actual sphere ray cast, you know, you're looking at something that is going to be so small I can't even see it. We'll get a little bit more thickness, right? Like a ray cast doesn't have any thickness to it. Oh, whoops! I need to make that like 0.5. There we go. That's what I was trying to do. Right now, let's bring this down. Right, like even 0.01 would be really thick for a raycast. So if you think of a raycast, when you shoot a beam, you're looking at a pinpoint thing that you're trying to hit, right? If that would mimic our raycast, right? It is a tiny 1 pixel width beam, and it hits. A sphere cast is the exact same thing, but you could go like that, and you have a much thicker thing. So if you're dealing with smaller objects, such as maybe your character's going to pick up keys and cups, personally I like sphere cast. They work exactly the same, right? Like if I do ray cast, I'll show you both. I would recommend getting Raycast 2, which is on the ecosystem, right? You have Raycast, Raycast 2. The only difference is in Raycast 2, somebody with a big brain added the miss event to it, which is beautiful. So we're going to raycast from our camera because that's like our eyes. That's the middle of our screen. We want to go in our forward direction, which is 1Z of our camera. So space self. And a distance of, I don't know, 2, right? However far you want to go. Now, in Raycast 2, you have 2 events. Hit and no hit, right? If you look at Raycast 1, it's all the same thing, but you only have a hit event. You don't have the non-hit event. So another valuable lesson for anybody out there is to throw things on layers. So if I'm a player, I'm putting myself on the player layer. And if I want to interact with these cubes, I'm going to make a layer. We'll call it interactions maybe. Right? So we have the player and then the interaction layer. And then you could always tag those for different effects too. We won't get into that. So we're going to raycast. Only I said raycast 2. So I have the hit event. We hit something. I don't know what the fuck we hit, but we hit something. We missed. Right? And we want to store the object we hit. Right? The repeat, which is how, like, if you put it to 1, it wants to fire this every frame. Right? Which isn't going to matter because we're either going to hit or miss, so we're going to go a different event anyways. But I'm going to put that 0. I want a layer mask. I'm only going to be shooting against our interactions layer. And that's because if I try to fire and this camera happens to be inside of us, which is normally the case, and we have a collider, in some cases that laser will come out right from that little anchor point and hit, if you can see it, the edge of our collider. Now with that said, you can adjust various things like that. If you go to your project settings and go physics, you can see queries hit back faces, right? So mine's turned off, so it would probably be fine anyways, but good practice to do that. So we have a hit and no hit. So let's add those events. We have hit something. We have missed. If we have missed, we're just going to go back. We have missed, there's no point. But if we have hit something, and this is the object we have hit, we want to more or less get position. We need 2 of those, right? We're going to get position of Grabby McGrab. Every frame. We're going to get the position also of what we hit. Every frame. Alright, cool. There's a few other things we want to do. We want to set parent, and this will help keep things smooth with it for us. So we want to set the parent of what we hit to Grabby McGrab, and world position stays. We also want to, and this is kind of more of an added bonus, you don't have to do this, I like to do this. We want to set the drag on what we hit to something a little higher, right? Like you can say 2. It doesn't need to be every frame, right? So we're getting positions every frame. We set the parent and its drag I'm not going to put it to kinetic because I want this thing to have physics and do physical things, right? So with those positions, we need an operator. So what we need to do is take gravity's position and what we hit's position, and we subtract them. We get a direction from hit object to grabby every frame. Add force, move to the bottom, add force from what we hit, that direction, every frame. I'm going to use impulse. Now we might have to multiply this vector so it's a little quicker. Right now, that's great. That's there. We can now grab things. Now, do we want to grab if we just click and let go? Do we want to grab it so we click and hold click? Right, kind of idea? I don't know. So let's say get mouse button up. So we're going to put this right at the bottom, and we're going to say throw. So if we throw, what are we going to do? So we need to know what direction we're facing, which is why I did those boxes earlier, right? We don't base it on the player, base it on our virtual camera. So I'm going to transform direction of Grabby McGrab's camera here, our virtual camera, and I could go like 1, but to save me the multiplying of the vector, I'm going to say 15. And then I want to undo all of this kind of stuff, right? Like the drag and the parenting. So what we hit, I'm going to put the drag down to say 0.1. Probably good enough. The parent of what we hit to none, right? And then I want to add force. To what we hit, and we want to do throw direction. And force, I'll do impulse on that too. Well, why not? And then let's just go finish back to our waiting for the mouse button down. Alright, let's see what that looks. I should probably also hide the mouse. Lock and hide the mouse, because that'll probably mess me up. But if it doesn't, then it doesn't. I mean, it won't mess up the logic. It'll just be annoying seeing the mouse on the screen. Where in the hell did my boxes go? Oh, you know what? Right. You know what? I put them on a layer, and valuable lesson. Let's look at our physics layer. This is from playing with various assets. So if I look at interactions, it doesn't interact with various things, such as default. There's default. Where's interactions? Right there. We need to make sure those can collide. All right, let's try that again. I don't know if the player interacts with the boxes. This really doesn't matter. If you want it to, make sure it is. If you don't want it to, make sure it's not. Both are valid. Alright, so we're going to just truck along here. I should have made my guy move a lot quicker than this. And we click. Oh, I gotta click and hold. And there we have a box. And I could bat things around with it. If I let go, I throw it. Alright, so let's do a few tweaks. Let's multiply this force. So the box is a little quicker. Doesn't need to be that much. So the direction from hit to grabby, let's multiply it by like 5 every frame. And that's probably good. Let's make a new start state and set cursor to lock and hide. There we go. And let's maximize. Try that again. Ah, I should have sped up the player. Damn it. Alright, well, our guy's walking at a crawl. Alright, so we're crawling over to these boxes, and if I click, nothing's happening. Right, I gotta be able to get closer. Like, oh, always do that, click, and so I click, and I can bat things with it. Maybe times 5 force is a little high. Right, and I can push things around with this thing if I wanted to. Right, because it's using force. And if I throw it, there we go. So, but that's really, it's really all there is. Like I said, other than a couple tweaks, right? Like maybe that, let's just times it by 2. Let's also set the drag a little higher by doubling it. So I guess a little means a lot. And yeah. Oh, I was going to make that ray cast a little farther, like 2, which I mean sounds like a lot. Like it's technically 2 meters from the camera, but really, from perspective and gameplay wise, I mean 2.5 might be a better option. I don't know. Right, so there we have should probably change that impulse to just a normal force, or even just a set velocity would also work for it. But the adding force is nice because you can do things like this and bat things around and do crazy stupid things and just throw it, pick it up and throw it, whatever, pick it up, pick it up, throw it. So there you have the pimpin', grab and throw. Like I said, now preferentially I would prefer over Raycast 2 even, and this is also on the ecosystem, is Sphere Cast, right? So it's literally the exact same thing, but now I can give it a little bit of thickness, right? And that's what the radius is. So let's go 2.5. Let's make it a little farther. Other than that, we set it up exactly the same, right? And it has that same. We hit something and we missed. Now the thing is, you notice how there's no object here. Like, what the hell did we hit? I can store did hit, but I can't store what the hell we hit. So we do need to add one more action. And that's get raycast hit info. Right, and that's what we hit there. Now, Spearcast 2, which is on Ecosystem, probably has the storing of the hit, because that just kind of seems like an oversight. Why we wouldn't have the object we actually hit with the raycast in the raycast results, beyond me. But there you have. Right, so it works the same. But if I wanted to aim off to the side just a little, not on him, right? Like I can't hit him, but there I snagged him, right? So because we have that little bit of thickness to our ray now, which just makes things a lot easier to grab. It feels a lot more fluent. It's just better. So do it that way. It's better, right? So if you have finer things, because the one raycast, I mean, if you have small objects, such a pain in the ass. It's more frustrating than anything trying to pick up something small with a raycast. Like unless you have like literally a cursor in the middle of your screen saying you are aiming here, right? So grab and throw like a champ.